they're trying to tell us we don't need people anymore, right? And I will always make one example of a person I really despise, Yuval Noah Harari, that one.
He's like the one of the speak pieces of the agenda of the elites and the World Economic Forum and all that stuff, where they pretend like they're trying to do things for the betterment of mankind, but they're really doing it for the betterment of the 500 richest people or whatever, or the 13 families or all the conspiracy theories, which turned out, I used to call myself a conspiracy theorist. Now I'm just a spoiler alerter.
Welcome back, guys, on ROCK SEO. I'm here with Rocky, and we have today the artist formerly known as blakeArt. And today we will talk about reality and assumptionism, which is a new topic, and Rocky's not too sure about this one. So let's dive deep.
Well, hey, thanks, Gabrio, for having me on your podcast.
The visionary artist, formerly known as Blake, follows a simple idea inspired by Terence McKenna. Art is meant to move people, challenge thinking, and push us towards something better. He sees himself as a self-selected artist, pulling ideas from beyond the obvious and turning them into digital form. His work is about translating those ideas into something real, something that connects, questions, and evolves. Through his art and his philosophy, simulation assumptionism, he aims to rethink how we see reality, creativity, and even systems like capitalism, with the goal of making them work better for the people. At the core, it's simple. Ideas shape reality. Art brings them to life. Welcome on ROCK SEO.
I'm a 35-year veteran of the advertising and marketing space, and I've had to evolve from when I started my career. I was, in print. I could do anything print. I did working at ad agencies. I was kind of a pocket folder specialist, which is old school. What pocket folders were was you'd give those to the sales staff and they'd go out and make their sales calls with all their literature. Well, that turned into websites. So people don't print pocket folders anymore, because if you make a spelling mistake on 50,000 pocket folders, that's a nightmare. If you make a spelling mistake on a website, you go to bed, you get up the next day, and you fix it, right? So it's just so that's kind of how we've had to roll with the punches, in our industries, and especially now with all this automation and AI. So this is kind of where we're at as a society, and that's this is the questions I've been asking for a long time.
There are, points in time where people think, "Oh, I'm at a crossroad now, where I want to move on to next." But this is a nice introduction. So, but tell us a little bit more. I mean, so this is a bit your background, and at what point in time you thought, "Hey, I have to do something different," and essentially where you are at now with reality design and the job spectrum. Maybe we can start with that.
I was born an artist. I was just able to draw anything and everything out of the gate. I mean, I wasn't Picasso by any means, but I just drew and drew and drew and drew. And it was, when I went to college, I was going to get a BFA and be a painter, but they didn't teach. They taught us how to do all the paintings and drawings and the techniques, but they didn't teach us the business of being an artist, and the whole starving artist motif. So I switched gears my junior year in college and went into advertising and become a creative director, graphic designer type guy. And I was never really out to blow everybody's doors off, but I worked at a couple of really nice agencies early on and gained some great experience and had some wonderful times. Won some smallish ad awards. But I've worked at big corporations. I've worked at in-house marketing departments for smaller places, smaller ad agencies. And around 2011 and 12, well, and here's something that will kind of ring the memory banks for people. What I used to do when I worked at my agency in Chicago is they'd be like, okay, here's the assignment. Go off in your little office and dream up something, and we'll see you next week. So I had, there was nobody looking over my shoulder or anything. So we would all put in on our headphones to be creative, and I would listen to something called video.google.com. And this was long format videos because YouTube, you could only watch the videos at like 8, 9, 10 minutes at a time. And I would listen to lectures and podcasts. I started listening to Joe Rogan like almost from the very beginning. But video.google became YouTube because they bought YouTube, and then they put that
Yeah,
technology
correct. Yeah.
into YouTube to where YouTube can have, you can have 24-hour videos on YouTube now, which is hilarious. So,
Yeah.
and I've listened to some of those at night when I'm sleeping. But I saw a TED Talk back in 2012 by a guy named Andrew McAfee, and the title of his TED Talks were "Race Against the Machine: Are the Droids Taking Our Jobs?" And that had a profound impact on me because this was back in 2012. He was just like, in the future, there's going to be more and more people, but we're just not going to need that many workers because productivity's through the roof. You've got all these corporations paring down and laying off and firing their workforce to make their bottom line and their quarterly reports be 10% higher. So this type of thing has been happening for a while. And then I also saw a comedy routine with this guy named Bill Hicks, who's a very famous comedian from the United States. He's also very popular in Europe and especially in England. But one of his famous routines, because he used to be a copywriter before he became a comedian, but he said in his routines, hey, if any of you in the audience are in advertising or marketing, kill yourselves. So that was the joke, right? So that made me really question, and this is the question in a roundabout way that you asked me. Where did I pivot away from being just being a cog in the machine to try to develop something that is ethically and morally a little bit more palatable for society to work on, and also does something that is for the good of mankind? And through all the podcasts and esoteric knowledge, I'm like a knowledge conduit. I've been, ever since I was a kid. I got for my 12th birthday, I asked for the encyclopedia, the World Book Encyclopedia. And I had my grandparents' encyclopedia from like the 30s or 40s. And when I got mine, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, however old I was, I got the A book from the old one and the A book from the new one, and I flipped through both and compared. That's how big of a dork I was. So, I know now that I'm this age and I've got the gray hair and whatever, now I'm like, hey, maybe there's a better way to do things. Maybe we can do things that where we're a little bit more gentle on the earth. We're more stewards of this planet, and we take care of the planet and each other a little bit better. Because right now we're not doing any of those things.
Yeah, the shift in our field, I mean marketing, which is sort of related also to what you were doing earlier on, is that it never stopped changing, first of all. And there are always those times where people think, hey, this is dead. We will not be able to do that. We need to do something else. And they say the strongest will survive, which is sort of true, the law of the jungle. And even in this day and age, people were questioning, hey, will we still need so many people, etc., which are bigger topics. But then, you switched gears now on the, reality and assumptionism, which we mentioned earlier on. And then what you do at the job spectrum, which I know because we talk about this together before, but for our viewers, they have no clue probably. So maybe we can start with that.
While I was at the agency in Chicago, I kind of had a eureka moment, and it came from my artwork. So all this came so while I never stopped really doing art. I've got like on the wall behind me here, those are all pictures I've taken. But I paint once in a while. I do pen and ink drawings. But I do digital stuff, and in Adobe Illustrator and in Photoshop. And those were that was kind of the tools that I used. And I really had I really wish I could have learned Adobe After Effects, but it was just over my head. And there's some guys from my hometown who were a huge influence on me. And the name of their shop was MK12. And if you go to mk12.com, you can see some of they did opening credits for like 3 James Bond movies. They've done just a tremendous amount of work, but their graphics are moving. And that's kind of the way my digital artwork represents that type of the moving graphics, like when you watch the news and you have the beginning of the news and you've got all the shapes moving around, and Eyewitness News, channel 6 from, wherever. But that's how my brain has always worked. I think in pictures because I'm an artist, Gabrio, right? So I don't think in numbers, and that's kind of, been something that has been, I see the way kind of consciousness has arranged itself. That's kind of what I've come into with the whole job spectrum idea. I've got all this esoteric knowledge about ancient Egypt, about mathematical concepts, something called the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio, and then also something called the Mandelbrot set, which, I don't know if you've heard of those. Have you heard of those?
The first 2, yes. The third one, no.
Mandelbrot set is a mathematical concept where you discovered by a guy named Benoit Mandelbrot. He worked at IBM back in the 60s. And what he did was he fed an equation back into a computer. And since they had computers back then, they were just big, huge mainframe computers.
Huge, yeah.
Right? So they weren't like our desktop computers at all.
Yeah.
But what you do is you feed an equation back into, and it would just keep looping and looping. And it creates this type of a 3-dimensional graph, which is very dynamic, and people call it the thumbprint of God, is what it's described to be. Because what it is it's an arrangement of data in 3D format that is infinite, because the equation never ends, and that represents how consciousness arranges itself. And if you'll indulge me, just real quickly, I'll kind of go into a little bit of an explanation for it. So there was a guy named Loren Carpenter, okay, and he worked at Boeing, and they came to him, this big giant American corporation, and they were trying to solve a problem at Boeing. It's like their photo shoots were incredibly expensive. They had to gas up a plane and fly it above. They wanted to have all the pictures of the planes flying over mountains. They had all these different planes they had to do this for. Super expensive. So Loren Carpenter was a computer programmer, and they were like, hey, if there's anything you can do to help us automate this process, that would be a big feather in your cap and our cap. So he was at a used bookstore one weekend, and he found this book by Benoit Mandelbrot. So, Fractals, their forms and dimensions in nature. Okay, that's the title of the book. And he says in this one Nova program that I send to everybody, I probably sent it to you, Fractals Hunting the Hidden Dimensions. He read it cover to cover twice, over the weekend. He went into work that week, and within 3 days, he was animating mountains so they could stick a picture of a plane in front of it and make it look like they were flying over mountains. And it was like, it solved a tremendous monetary problem. Of course, that's the, necessity. Solving money problems is the mother of invention, right? But what he unlocked is he's the father of computer animation. So they immediately, the first film where he worked on it was in Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan or something, and they fly through this, planetary graphic animation, and then all of a sudden it was easy to do, and everybody was doing it. And MK12 and Adobe After Effects is a big part of how all that works. Adobe After Effects is one of the creative software programs that incorporated this thinking. And what this thinking is the thinking like fractals, okay? And that's what Benoit Mandelbrot discovered. And So when you had special effects in movies before computer animation, you'd have like Godzilla, right? And you'd see Godzilla and he would be stomping through Tokyo, but you'd be in the movie eating your popcorn. You'd be like, that's a guy in a suit. He's on a set and they're blowing stuff up and it's made to look, but you know, you go to the movies and you suspend your belief system to buy in. You buy, very important concept, buying in. To buy into, which will come up later with my simulation assumptionism discussion, if you want to go into that. But if you buy into that's Godzilla in Tokyo, just, you know, fighting, you know, whoever the villains of the Godzilla movies are, you know, that's what movies do. But when you watch Star Wars or any of these new, you know, movies with these computer animated, you know, graphic, you know, generated special effects, you can't tell what's real and what's not. And here's why. Because they use the Fibonacci sequence with the golden ratio and the Mandelbrot set in the arrangement like that, this is a very important point. It does a better job of emulating consciousness. Okay? That's why we're fooled now when we go to the movies. A lot of the scenes in the movies we think are taking place, you know, out in the jungle or on a set of a 1920s, you know, biplane. You know, I think of the movie about the billionaire Howard Hughes, you know, The Aviator. You know, 3/4 of the scenes in that movie took place in a studio with just green screens. Okay, that's computer animations, and it fools human beings and our eyes and the way our brains work, just like you know, your brain gets fooled by a optical illusion. You think that's happening, but it's not.
Yeah, that one, sorry if I interrupt, is a interesting one, especially when you watch a movie also from, you know, a while back, right? So especially because this has evolved so much, you know, into the newer stuff, and it's great to have this perspective because I couldn't articulate it that well. I mean, it's just advanced stuff, I would have said.
For sure.
But when you look at the older ones, you go, okay, this one is super fake. I can tell it's fake, in fact. But the latest ones, and there's so many examples, they're actually, you go, okay, wait a second. Did they actually shot this one or not? I think an earlier one, which was, I don't think, I mean, the latest gen, but was already amazing, was the Gladiator, no?
Oh, yeah.
You remember when they are in the arena, in the Coliseum thing, and then they duplicate all the armies, all the legionaries there, and they didn't have all those. I think they have a number of, but then they duplicate them. And that was already amazing. And it was already probably 20 years old, that movie already.
Well, and here's the other thing that's interesting about it too. You know, the news and the information we're fed through the news uses the same technology. So it's like, you know, we have to scratch our heads. Is this something that's real? Or is this something that's well, right, exactly. Well, and here's the thing. So I am a rabbit hole spelunker, okay? So I have the longest rope and the brightest headlamp, and I've been down, you know, the vast majority of these, you know, sticky situation rabbit holes types of a deal. And that's why I'm so excited about the job spectrum, which was my new business concept that gave birth to my philosophy through my reality-redesign.com website.
Before we go there, what I find very interesting is what you said also earlier, that there are a number of business issues or business situations which unlock then incredible thinking. And I mean, the Boeing example was a great one because, you know, it's a big problem. Then they wanted to solve it, which there's some parallel, I think, in what's happening today, you know, with all the frenzy with the AI, although it's super frenzy in general, but it does solve problems effectively on, hey, help you for such and such admin tasks that are difficult, or just a small example, or other things. So you can unlock effectively business problems with the new use of technology.
Well, like anything, it's a double-edged sword. You know, you can use it for good, or you can use it for a nefarious intent. And, you know, sad to say there's a giant squad of people out there with nefarious is in their agenda, and that's what I'm on the side of good, So I everything I come from, all this, the ideas that I've had in my life and that I'm trying to freaking manifest. I'm not trying to manifest. I am manifesting these things into, but they all come from the world of art and creation. So I'm aligned with the golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence, which is, the eternal mathematical principles of nature, which comes from our creator.
And the art also, you mentioned that comes a time where artists are really having a difficult time, to be artists. And that's something also I seen firsthand. My wife started her art business a little while ago,
That's right.
I told you. And
I visited
it's not
her
been
site.
easy.
She's got a lot of talent.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, but it's bloody hard, right? To be, don't want to say being known, but just be maybe recognized sometimes for what she does. Also because there's a ton of artists out there, and in that space, especially the computer generated stuff doesn't help because you can do art generated with AI even, right? So one time she told me, "How can I compete with that?" And I said, "Well, you'll maintain, sorry, the word, I don't like that one, authenticity, to do what you like doing and continue that way, and then we will see, in years, if it didn't work, then maybe we'll do something else."
That's the whole reason why, I am the artist formerly known as blakeArt. I mean, that's a tongue-in-cheek thing, but that is exactly what your girlfriend or significant other is going through, and there's an establishment in the art world, and you're either in the in crowd or you're not, and and there's outsider art. I would put myself in that category, because I'm not an accepted. People aren't scrambling to collect Blake's yet, but they will be, because I mean, this is the path I've chosen for myself. I've made it incredibly difficult on purpose so that it's more fun.
Of course, you want the most difficult, of course.
Well, with these two concepts, Gabrio, I'm trying to eat the elephant in one bite. So but that comes from the whole Terence McKenna philosophy that you kind of touched on.
Yeah, let's expand on that. Can you tell us something about that one?
So Terence McKenna is a big time philosopher. He died, I believe, in before 2012, but he was a psychonaut, meaning that he approached psychedelics and sacred psilocybin mushrooms and stuff from a scientific standpoint. He wasn't doing it for fun or for kicks. He was doing it as a scientist because he's a smart guy. But he went around and lectured about it, and there are literally weeks and months worth of content about Terence McKenna and all the forums he did and speaking engagements. He was smart enough to know that the internet was coming and that this stuff would stand the test of time for prosperity. And he has a legion of people who really fought, and it's all the alternative crowd. It's comedians, it's alternative historians, people who that there are sacred substances that are on this earth to inspire humanity and to give us access to these different realms that do exist. I mean, this stuff exists, but the way I see it as an artist and as a Mandelbrot guy and as a Fibonacci sequence and golden ratio, you can focus on the realms that are icky or painful or suffering and all that stuff, or you can focus on the more eternal heavenly realms where everybody gets along and we're all, we all chose to come to earth and be born to earth and forget everything and rediscover or remember we are all members of, this, we are all, one of the titles of one of the paintings I painted, it's called We Are One in the Same, meaning it's like a double entendre. Now you could say, hey, Gabrio, we're one and the same because we both like, Star Wars, or whatever, right? But when you say we are one in the same, same is like another word for existence. So we are all one in existence is kind of, that's what they, and it was a dream I had. The painting was inspired by a dream that I had. And it was a bunch of like Mayan guys who were in a Mayan ball court. And I painted it to where the two leaders of each team, I was just there witnessing it, and they were looking right at me. It was like hundreds of guys, and they had these masks on. It was like Apocalypto by Mel Gibson. It was that kind of because it took place at an Aztec ball court, and the two like captains of each team jumped up in the air and went into each other's mouths and swallowed each other and formed an omega with their bodies in the sky. And then they all stopped what they were doing and turned and looked at me and said, "We are one in the same." And I painted it exactly how I saw it. And then I had another artist buddy of mine went on vacation to Mexico, and he went down, I can't remember the exact place, but he took pictures. And when I saw his vacation pictures, it was the same place that I had dreamt. Dude, it's the weirdest thing. I mean, it's just, and this is the miracle of consciousness. It was kind of like, remote viewing is a thing. There's a CIA stuff on all that. It was a location that I saw, and it inspired me to paint it into a picture, which is, I love the fact that I have this talent. It's really an amazing feeling to be able to create something like that.
Yeah, and there is that connection to seeing things and then being inspired. Similarly, for my wife, she has a passion for drawing mountains, and most of her paintings now are mountains. And that stemmed from, when we went to beautiful Switzerland, 2 times or 3, I can't remember. So she was amazed by the power of the mountains there, the huge, they're very, I don't know if you've ever been, but everywhere you go in Switzerland,
I've been to
you have
Switzerland.
mountains everywhere.
Yeah. Oh,
And it's just incredible. So, and that came to her after, so not immediately, that came after some time. And at times, now when she paints, then maybe she will have a look at this on that mountain. There's one famous one, they call it the Toblerone shape. I don't know if you know that one. If I'm not wrong, it's Zermatt, it's called. And that's that as a typical signature shape. So it's interesting how these things get connected, and you have a realization, I saw that, and then I'll paint it, but in a different way, not like the actual stuff, because it's a painting. And also another thing we see sometimes, people painting things that look like a photograph, and nothing wrong with that, but we think, is that a painting or a picture? Why they paint it that it looks like in the eyes, they do the details of the human features.
I used to love photorealism back when I was, early on. Well, another thing that really impressed me, and what's your wife's name again? I can't remember.
Lorraine.
So one of the things that really impressed me is she paints a lot of her paintings at night, and she has the moon in her paintings. And dude, that's not easy. That is very difficult. Very difficult. It's easier to paint something lit dramatically, in the daytime because you can see what it is. But night changes everything, and she does a very good job of rendering that. So kudos to her.
That's her thing. Now she's doing a new one as moon again, and the huge mountain is a big one. But yes, so, and there's some details there, which I said, look, if I personally, I cannot draw, or I can, but it will not look like that. I told her, and for her it's easy. So I told her it's not easy, but it's something, being very humble as well. That's another thing. Very many artists are humble. Let's move to the job spectrum, maybe. Let's get into that. So what it is, how it works, what you're expecting it to do in the future.
The battle I've had since I've, tuned into this pre-existing notion. That's the way because I'm not this smart. Do you know what I mean? I got my wits about me, and I fancy myself an intellectual, right? In the tradition of Mark Twain. I've got a little bit of a sense of humor about it, but this is a pre-existing notion that has selected me as its freaking spokesman. So this is why I wear this. I'm wearing this for a reason. I don't dress like this, all the time. I'm representing an archetype. I'm representing a school of thought that comes from like, Dr. Seuss, I'm the Lorax. I speak for the trees. This is coming from, the loving, benevolent, creative source that loves each and every one of us, and every grain of sand and every blade of grass is remembered, in the collective Akashic record of existence. Because we are within the mind of God. Again, we are one and the same and within the mind of God. So, the job spectrum came from applying these types of sensibility and principles and coming up with an idea that puts people to work doing something. So we're redefining what the job spectrum does. It's not a place where you go look for a job, even though when the job spectrum spins up and gets going and there's thousands of people employed, there'll be tons of opportunity for employment. And that's the thing we have to do is as a civilization, we have to instead of, trying to capitalize on our, ignorance and farming us for, pain, deaths, and monetizing pain, death, suffering, and all that other stuff. Let's put ourselves to work doing stuff that's productive to clean up the planet, to help each other out, and to do all those things. The job spectrum gives us that opportunity by using pre-existing tired concepts, marketing, advertising, and the worst of all, surveys. Okay, the job spectrum is a survey, but it's made in a way to where it gives us all something to do, and it monetizes the media channel where we're taking the survey to where we split the proceeds of the ads that are on the in and around the survey questions. How do we split the proceeds? By the results of the survey. So it's like a perpetual motion machine, right? It's like an engine that runs on the fuel of itself, but it's embedded in the eternal mathematical laws and principles of nature. And it's a mechanism. This is the job spectrum mechanism, and it turns.
Oh, look at that.
It turns like this. But it always falls out of it. It's actually a spiral. So it spirals like this because it's based on the zodiac. So, but which is consciousness.
I think we need to take a little step back because I think it's a lot of information here to make it simple for our viewers.
So if you go to thejobspectrum.com, there's a place where you can, if you're interested in learning more about it, I can send you a link to the most recent survey. And so what the job spectrum does, here's my big dilemma, Gabrio, okay? I've invented a watch. It tells time so you can organize your day. So that's the way I should explain the job spectrum, what it does for you and what it does for society. Instead, I always fall into the trap of saying, here's the job spectrum. Oh, it's so cool. Look at all the gizmos, and it's based on the nature, and it does all these things. So I always fumble what the job spectrum does. What the job spectrum does, and this is, I hate to tell you, people, but it's a better mousetrap for the way human beings can organize and run themselves. So that is what it is. That is what benefit does Gabrio get by participating in the job spectrum?
That's the answer. That's the question I want to have the answer for.
This is like an invention. Okay? It's a new game or procedure. Okay? And the analogy I use to help explain that is CrossFit. Are you familiar with CrossFit?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a global sensation. But in 2006, CrossFit didn't exist. Okay? So some guy in California invited 100 of his friends, and he did the first CrossFit competition where they got a bingo thing with the ping pong balls in it with the numbers, and they wrote the different exercises on the ping pong balls. And they had all the equipment to do all those exercises in the facility where they did the first CrossFit event. And they did the thing, and they pulled out for 3 days. Each day had like 6 balls that they pulled out, right? So no one knew what they were going to be doing. So, but that was the, so what he did was he gamified exercise. Instead of going to the gym and just doing a bunch of sit-ups and push-ups and pull-ups and bench presses and squats and not having, anything really to talk about, they made it into they sportified exercise to where you have to do these things and you don't know what it's going to be, but you've got to have your body in good enough shape to where you're versatile enough to be able to do all the exercises that might be in the ping pong balls, okay? That is what the job spectrum does with capitalistic concepts. There's nothing new in the job spectrum. The only thing that's new about the job spectrum is the thinking behind what happens. It's like a new recipe. All the food ingredients are the same. It's just a new way of making something that tastes freaking fabulous, right? So that is the analogy I use that hopefully people will get their mind around the concept. You don't need to know anything else, but you take this survey and you rank the different job groupings that are within the survey. And what you're doing by that is you're assigning value, okay? That is what that does is it manufactures data, but with meaning. It manufactures meaningful data that human beings control. Right? This is an AI. This isn't being generated. And it gives us something to do. It's a new way to work. And the job spectrum is just one application. The job spectrum is like a prototype for this type of thinking. Russell Brand was just on Tucker Carlson last week. And everybody keeps tiptoeing around, well, in the future, we're going to have new ways of governing ourselves and but no one comes up with any solutions, but they come up with the idea of how to do it, right? This is and this isn't the way to do it, okay? It's just one of a million, billion, trillion different ways to do it. So you watch, Dancing with the Stars or Star Search, right? And all the, my mom's a big fan of that, and she sits home and watches it, and then they go, vote for your favorite dancing pair, call these numbers. Well, that's democracy right there in action. Why don't we do that for, every quarter? Why don't we do that for, assigning where the budget's going to go instead of just, letting these elected officials, and this is where it gets dangerous, Gabrio. This is where it gets dangerous because people are like, oh, you thought of a better mousetrap way to, do democracy? Well, we're going to have to frickin' eliminate you, But, I don't, at this point, I'm like, I think people are ready for something new, but we have to, as a civilization, let's take a break. And that's what gave birth to my simulation assumptionism philosophy. Because that was born of the job spectrum idea.
There's also the other aspect of, maintaining people still, I don't want to say useful is not a nice word, but that's what it is also. Because, some of those, at the top, they're trying to tell us we don't need people anymore, right? And I will always make one example of a person I really despise, Yuval Noah Harari, that one. I keep on coming up with these videos which are super creepy. The guy sold 1 million of books, by the way. I don't know who's buying them.
I think it's all, that guy's just, and who is he to decide?
Exactly. No, but if you hear his speeches are like, how can this guy still be allowed on the platforms? I mean, they allow him, obviously, and I know I'll be a bit controversial here, but the things the guy said are like, it should be, I don't want to say mean things, but, it shouldn't be around that guy, because keep on saying, hey, people that are not doing meaningful jobs, they shouldn't be around anymore. They're useless for the society. Granted, we have different types of jobs levels, so people do things that they like or they don't like, or maybe they cannot do because they didn't have the chance to study, all of that. But, before coming up with those type of sentences, it's incredible what that guy comes up. I'm glad you know that guy already.
You brought up an amazing point. And so this was the whole, he's like one of the speak pieces of the agenda of the elites.
Correct.
And
Correct.
The World Economic Forum and all that stuff, where they pretend like they're, trying to do things for the betterment of mankind, but they're really doing it for the betterment of the 500 richest people or whatever, or the 13 families or all the conspiracy theories, which turned out, I used to call myself a conspiracy theorist. Now I'm just a spoiler alerter, right?
Or a realist, right? Because that's how it is
That's
these
how
days.
it is. Here is the question. If I could get him in a room and you were him and I was talking to him, the first question I would ask him is like, with all your World Economic Forum buddies, where's your art? Where's the art you're producing that is a part of, this creative process? They've got nothing. All of their policies, and they don't think anything about beautification or anything to make the world even physically a better place. It's all about control and all about, it's like 1984. If you want to imagine the future, it's a boot on the face of mankind stomping in eternity. And all these freaking people, and that was just a book. But the guy who wrote that, George Orwell, knew the plan of the elites back when he wrote that book. This has been in the works for thousands of years. But I'm telling you, there's all kinds of other stuff that they suppress. So another quote from Terence McKenna after I say the quote, you can go on to the next point. And I'll do my Terence McKenna. I know you've never heard of him, but I do a pretty mean imitation of Terence McKenna. And Terence McKenna said, the world is not only strange. Oh, I like to quote the British botanist L.H.S. Hazeltine, who said, the world is not only stranger than we suppose. The world is stranger than we are capable of supposing. So there's my Terence McKenna imitation.
What do you think is next? I mean, where we're heading for the foreseeable future? Could be in a downward spiral, depressing slash, or we have to be positive, looking at the good, or we need to stop the people like the World Economic Forum, dictating what people should be doing and giving them less power. Although I don't know how that bit.
Well, and that is a tough nut to crack, Gabrio. But so one of the top 13 tenets of simulation assumptionism, you just articulated it right there. Tenet number 10 is language is the code that programs reality itself. And what you said that I caught, like a fish hook in my clothes, is it a downward spiral? Right? And that is the shape of the golden ratio in the Fibonacci sequence. We can either look towards the negative because it's all mathematical. Aristotle says all is number. We can either follow the tunnel down to where we're suppressed and we're in bondage and, we never catch a break. And, Oliver from Great Expectations, please, sir, can I have some more? That famous line. And when he said that, the headmasters in charge were like, kill that kid. I mean, when you ask for a little bit more from the established, rulers, they get pissed. And it's just, to me, the establishment can have the larger chunk of the golden ratio. Just give us, the rest of us, the smaller chunk. And the percentage is 61.8% and 38.1%. And there's 1% that's always missing. Why? Or 0.1%, because it's infinite. It's never a clean thing. It's always, and that's the spiral thinking. That's how I think. This is the way my brain works. I mean, I'm lucky, I guess, that I'm one of the few people that actually thinks in pictures and in concepts. I dream in color. Everything's super vibrant. I'm like tapped into the higher vibrating frequency. It's hard to articulate. Let me tell you, it is very difficult to bring the concept of the infinite into this particular physical realm. However, I feel it in my being and in my heart and my chakras, up into my, my crown chakra and my pineal gland. I've been to the mountaintop. This is what I've come back with. The job spectrum business concept, reality redesign, new philosophy, top 13 tenets of simulation assumptionism. So, and what I want to do is I want to address those elites. If there's an elite guy who's watching this, hey, they're ruled by fear too, because they're afraid. There's a famous thing on YouTube you can watch. It's called Born Rich. Okay. And it's about all these super wealthy New York kids who, and this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. One of the people in the documentary is Ivanka Trump. She's 16, 17, 18 years old. And, all these kids are just, they don't ever have to worry about money. They've got so much money, it's coming out their ears. They had an interview with this one kid, and his dad took him when he was like 7, 8 years old to Grand Central Station in New York City. And his dad, said, hey, Bobby, take a look around. We own this. This is ours. And here's what else we own. We own all this other stuff, right? But every single one of these kids was so messed up because it's like the plot of Arthur, the movie Arthur with Dustin, what was his name? I can't remember the actor. But
doesn't matter.
The plot is you will lose your giant inheritance if you do not do as you're told, toe the line, fear, and they hold it over their heads constantly. Dudley Moore is the guy. See, that's how consciousness works. That's another one of my top 13 tenets. The brain is not, tenet number 11, the brain is not, you don't go to your brain to remember things. It's not stored in your brain. Your brain tunes into the infinite where every single blade of grass, every grain of sand is cataloged and organized by the mind of God. I mean, it's an astounding concept. Reality is not only stranger than we suppose, it's stranger than we're capable of supposing.
What you mentioned just now on the fear and controlled by fear is also what they try to do with all these operations. And now I don't want to be censored on YouTube and talking about super stuff that we know they will filter out here. But they do use that as a leverage for controlling people effectively, because when you're in fear, you are in that state that you can be controlled, right? You don't think straight. And what you just mentioned about these rich elite kids, they're taught that from a young age. So it's another way of running their life. And then when they grow up, then they become adults that then command others with fear and so on and so on.
Abusers were abused. Alcoholism runs in my family. And, all credit to my parents who did a fantastic job. I mean, I went down that path as a kid and, but I still drink, but I drink, it's like once in a blue moon now that I drink. Cause it's, I have the intellect now to where I choose not to drink because it makes me feel like shit. Right. So, and it's the same with everything. It's, it's having a highly developed mind that can, critical thinking, and that's on short supply.
The spiral going up, and that's for next. And what's other than that in the bookshelf for you? So the job spectrum, trying to push this one, or jobspectrum.com, guys, will link this one down below. What's next for that phase of the system there?
I'm really trying my hardest to be on any podcast I can be on, and I'm super grateful for you to allow me to be a part of yours, and I think that's fantastic. I've always been a guy that says, I want everybody to ski behind my giant boat. With my success, I'm gonna pull people. A rising tide raises all boats, and I'm going to do things differently. I don't have any aspirations to be the next billionaire, but I know that, and I might be like Van Gogh. I might not make a dime until I'm dead, and then everybody will want to, pay 100 million, billion, $1 trillion.
Which is what happens to artists, sad to say, right?
That's why I call myself the artist formerly known as blakeArt, because throughout history, it's the same old tune. artists are exploited for their talents, and somebody else usually benefits from that. But that's, like Patreon, that comes from the word patron. And, the artist had to go and do the king or the pope's bidding and paint what the pope wanted or what the king wanted. I want me painted with all my furs and my pet peacock and, wrestling a tiger or killing a dragon, right? I mean, and dragons didn't exist, by the way, remember? Just kidding, they did. So, so yeah, there's all kind. I mean, there's so much crazy stuff out there. I mean, this is a wonderful world, and we've just been kind of bamboozled into thinking we've got to be on our habit trail, wheel that we're
Not
constantly
like a hamster,
spinning.
yeah.
The hamster wheel. Thank you. Couldn't think of hamster. But yeah, that's kind of what we've been led to believe. That's what success is. And I'm not, I've worked really hard my whole life. I don't want to work that hard anymore. I want to travel, see the world, enjoy people's company who, have a different attitude about existence, and, seek knowledge about ourselves and love thy neighbor as thyself.
It's important. I think comes through different cultures, and we travel. I mean, now we just relocated to a new country, and you see also different work ethics. And I think the newer generation, I don't want to say they're lazy, but by any means, they just have a different understanding also of what they want. And I think that attitude was a bit different back in the day. Maybe can I say American? Work, 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 work. But because it's true, I don't want to offend anybody. And I thought at some point, hey, but there's more than work, 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 work. Although work is important, obviously. I think that's an answer the people have to find by themselves. What does it mean balance for you? And that's not so easy. People get swept away in their life, kids and stuff, or job. Again, the job takes so much time and energy. So that's what I'm trying to do with our own company. So I try to make it efficient, and I'm not too much neck deep all the time, and then we have still time to do other things. We just relocated. Now we took a place in a smaller city in the Czech Republic. And at first we thought we will go to Prague, the capital here. And one thing I was noticing, because also for me, creativity and thinking is very important, although I'm not an artist per se, that when I was in Prague, because it's so, big, noisy and congested, it's still a metropolis, a capital, and has been growing a lot, which is great, but it's also a big wheel moving slowly. I noticed I was not having creative thinking much we stayed there 2 months now, and I thought, if we move here, for me this will be really constant fighting with things here, the traffic, the people, which in this stage I don't want that for myself. So it's great to go there from time to time, for instance, but at the same time I thought I'm not going to have creative thinking now, and now I'm doing the YouTube channel or other projects. I want to have that little buffer extra for doing things which I really enjoy, because then I have more focus on the boring tasks I have to do to pay the bills, essentially, right? So that's one balance that we are trying to do, and that's what I personally find working. So stay living in a smaller city, which has a less overhead of things, and allows me to have more buffer for other things which are at this stage important for me.
Quality of life.
But you need to make choices and push back and pull the handbrake several times. And I think that's the most difficult thing people don't do enough. And then they say, oh, I don't like this, oh, I don't like where I live and stuff. Okay, do something about it, no? Do changes, or try at least, if the smallest change you can do, try changing things.
We've got all this technology, and it's, for convenience, right? This is going to make things more convenient for us to be able to surveil you. You're going to be able to use your palm print to go pay for things because it'll be more convenient. Well, that can be a good thing, or it could be used for nefarious intent. Unfortunately, they're using it for nefarious intent because they want to be able to. Don't carry a sign that says, I disagree with the way things are going, because we'll just turn off your money. And that is something that it's happening in China. They're trying, and that's the whole World Economic Forum agenda. And, I'm like, hey guys, you guys have won. You get all the rich people spoils and stuff. That's great. Let's change the tune a little bit and not be such freaking draconian nightmarish, because it's no fun. It's no fun for you. I know it's not any fun for you. Let's make this place more of like a travel amusement park, and clean it up and make it, have everybody's jobs be, one of the ideas I have about the United States is that towns could declare a time in which they existed, and everybody in that town role plays, just like cosplay. This is the ideas. I have these ideas coming out of my ears. Okay, where there's say there's a town in Missouri, the state I live in, and it's called Springfield. Springfield could declare itself an 1860s town. So everybody in the town, it would be like the Civil War, and people would dress the way they dress. We'd go back and build all the buildings out to make it look like it's, and then people from Europe could come over and vacation there and visit and buy the candy and eat at the restaurants and ride horses and, all that. It would be so much fun to do that. And that's just one town. You could have towns be from like the 1950s, or you could have a town that pretends it's from the future, or you could have, in Europe, you could have, medieval towns. We've got Renaissance fairs all over the United States. If we get a perpetual motion machine of people just traveling all over the world, everybody would have enough money, and then you give people 3 months of vacation a year when they're in their 20s, and then in their 30s they get 4 months vacation, and then when they're 50s they get 5 months vacation, and you just get until you don't have to work that hard anymore, because you do your hard work when you're the top 13 tenets of simulation assumptionism. You rearrange society by age. You work hard when you're young, and I'll ask you this question: what already does this? When you work in your industry when you're young, and then when you're over 35, 40 years old, you don't work anymore. Do you know what jobs do that already?
Train drivers, conductors, some of them start really young and then they can go in pension really early. Or police, perhaps? I'm not sure.
Sports,
okay.
Sports, everybody, you play sports when you're in your late teens, early 20s, and if you're lucky, into your mid 30s. Hockey, you can play hockey until you're about 50, 55 years old, because the way the sport is designed, those guys can still be effective if they're that good and they still want to do it, right?
They don't break themselves, right?
Well, exactly. There's Gordie Howe is a famous hockey player from, I think he was born in Canada, but played hockey until he was like in his mid 50s, which is amazing. That's really cool, because the design of hockey is, what a thrilling sport. And it's not the most popular thing, but it's popular in Europe. The Olympics, and the whole the sports is a window into the mystical and the infinite, because in sports statistics, if you're paying attention, there are things that happen in just about every sport that are freaking impossible. And that's one of my research bugaboos, that proves consciousness has structure. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Interesting parallel. Yesterday, I had another recording with Artyom, which is former professional volleyball player. Then he turned himself into a business strategist now. So you should talk to him. Very last topic for the recording today on the buildings. So I'm always wondering, the buildings, we have amazing buildings and structures. And they were even, by research we've done and the previous, civilizations, that they were functional, this building, you can even go back to Tesla, that energy and all that stuff. And we don't build them anymore. And we have amazing technology, resources. Now, supposedly, we have advanced stuff. And if you see the buildings today, they're shit. Sorry, the French. They're okay. They're functional. They're la merde, una merda. They are energy efficient. All you want, super, okay, great, everything, the energy saving, blah, whatever. but they're ugly buildings. They don't build anymore those beautiful, even, you mentioned Grand Central Station. I've been in New York a couple of times. It's beautiful. The building is all, I think it's a golden decorated, the ceiling, if it's not ruined now. And many other, here in Europe, we have so many examples of amazing buildings. And I think only now, what is it? Post offices, banks belong or have those as a headquarters and stuff. So lots there that, okay, should do beautiful buildings again. No, cannot do them anymore, of course.
Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for, all that ornate
excuse, right? Oh,
stuff?
it's expensive. Yeah.
It's because I'm going to give you two quick answers to that. Everything in the capitalist, how capitalism has evolved is, how can we build it cheaper? How can we make more money? Pennies on the dollar. How can we use cheaper materials to where we can just throw it up and and just make as much money as we can? And that lends credence to something, quote, Graham Hancock, famous author, wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, very controversial because he is questioning the establishment on archaeology, but he's an author. He's not an archaeologist. But anyway, one of his famous quotes is, civilization has lost its connection to spirit. Civilization has lost its connection to spirit, especially with the way capitalism operates. Hey, sorry I screwed you out of all your money, but hey, don't take it personal, Gabrio. It's just business. It's just business, baby. Don't take it. Go make some more money someplace else, and I'll just live off of what I, exploited out of you or tricked you out of. Everything's a trick. Everything is a rich man's trick. Google that or search YouTube on that one. That's a 3.5 hour rabbit hole that you will enjoy going down if you like going down rabbit holes. But that's answer number one. So we've lost our connection to spirit. Then there's this whole other thing that there's an agenda by the billionaires of 100 years ago. That's the Rockefeller Foundation and Andrew Carnegie and all these other freaking guys. They made it look like, we're doing things for the good of society. That's called public relations. They made it look like they were doing something for the good of society, but they were they were purposely dumbing us down and making us think that electricity has to come out of a socket in the wall, right? So they did that so that they could make money off of it, right? But the way the old world used to work and the things you were just addressing with the buildings and the ornate and the impossible sculptures and artwork. There are sculptures of out of marble with like a fishing net laying over the body of some, and it's like everything.
Amazing.
It's unbelievable. It's like, how the F did they freaking do that? And even the way that the older the buildings are, the more impossible
intricate
they are.
Yeah, correct.
And that is the suppressed history where I get all my knowledge for the job spectrum and for my reality redesign top 13 tenets of simulation assumptionism.
Or diving deeper into these topics, guys, please get in touch with the artist formerly known as Blake here. And I will leave all his links down below. Before we wrap up, I will ask you the usual question I ask all my guests. If you could nominate our next guest, who would that be?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first guy that comes to mind, and he's really in demand right now, is a guy named Kurt Metzger. But he is an alternative thinker, and he's a comedian. A lot of the world of comedy is luckily, one of the things that is kind of holding it's comedy's job to hold the establishment to a higher level. Quit being such jerks, you freaking establishment. No. Klaus Schwab. No, Klaus. You've got to be nice to everybody. There's plenty of work for people to do, and we don't have to kill everybody for pennies on the dollar to make profits. There's that. But there's a guy, Martin Ricketts is a guy I would nominate. He's a guy. In fact, you guys would get along great. His work. So as a creative, I'm more like an alchemist, and I've got ideas all over the place, books open, inspiration. It's a mess, because that's how artists, we've got our alchemist lab where we've got everything going. Martin Ricketts, I'll put you in contact with him. He is a guy who organizes and thinks the most efficient way possible. And he is somebody, you would love to have Martin on your podcast. And boy, am I glad I thought of that, because it's perfect.
Where can people find you? What's the best channel?
The best way, I guess, to contact me is through LinkedIn. And you just do a search for Matt, brackets, the artist formerly known as blakeArt, Blake. So that's my banner. The banner says The Art of Consciousness, because consciousness is an art form. Because we're living in a giant installation that the creator made as a gift for us. And then he sent his son down to redeem us from all the stupid bullshit that went on, 2,000 years ago. Yeah. And now, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and we're all kind of now responsible for this new way of thinking. And I like to consider myself, bearing as a part of the team that's bearing the water of this new stuff. So you can contact me through LinkedIn, or you can go to my Twitter feed, and that's a reality, but it's spelled reality, REDESIG1.
Okay, we'll find that, don't worry, and we'll put down the links down below. Thank you so much for that. Today we talk about a number of very deep topics. Today here with the artist formerly known as Blake. And I think Rocky is still a little confused, especially on the job spectrum, but you can find more details in the links down below. So please check out the links here, and maybe Rocky then will know a little more, and all of you, hopefully. So thank you once again. It was a pleasure having you on.
Bye, Rocky.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. He wants to go. Bye-bye.